Hi, everybody. It's Jim Knight, and I'm excited today to talk to Sherry St. Clair. She's really making a name for herself in coaching, and she's the author of Redefining Coaching. Sherry and I had a conversation a few months ago, and we thought, well, let's have it live. Or at least I thought, let's have it live where we can actually see each other and talk about it. I've enjoyed her book immensely and learned an awful lot from her. I'm excited to learn more today as we get a chance to have this conversation. So Sherry, thank you so much for taking the time to meet. It's exciting. We get to talk it through. Hopefully our technology won't let us down. It's been kind of giving us a little bit of a jolt here, but we'll see how it goes.
Yes, fingers crossed.
Yeah, we had a long conversation about Kansas versus Kentucky basketball, and then Sherry said, but I'm not really that interested in it. So I had to kind of rethink it. Sherry, I usually start with this one question, which is, what's something people don't know about you? And I'm wondering if you are with us so we can hear the answer to the question.
Yes, so, Jim, I'm pretty much an open book. I don't have, know that I have a lot of things that I don't share with people, but maybe that my love of art. I absolutely love art, painting, making pop is a bowl I made. So I really enjoy art.
Sherry, we're not connected very well with the technology, so let me switch to the phone and see if that makes things a little better. So we'll hold on here and try tethering.
Okay.
Sorry, folks.
Just living in the country, so I'm living with country internet. So we're reconnected. I think hopefully it'll be a little better. So, so your love of art, you said, is something people might not know about you, although you are, as you said, an open book. My first question is just kind of a historical question. How did you come to study coaching?
Well, Jim, I really think that kind of found me. I have been a classroom teacher, and as a classroom teacher, I always knew that I wanted to get into administration, but I also knew that I loved the aspect of teaching and learning. And so after I received my administrative degree, I went for a degree in curriculum and instruction, and those two, my work, I've greatly enjoyed the work that I get to do with coaching. But I moved from being a classroom teacher to a high school administrator, and then a middle and high school coach at the Kentucky Department of Education. And then my national work began to grow from there. So now I have three and beyond, and I absolutely feel so blessed to get to do that work. It is just an honor to walk beside people as they grow, and that's what I love to do.
I don't know if we're working or not with our technology, but I'm getting most of what you're saying, so hopefully it'll work out. I echo exactly what you say, that it's a privilege, an honor, and it's just really, and also just the fact that we're focused. To me, the two things that coaches focus on are fundamental to life. One of them is relationships, and one of them is relationships, and one of them is learning. And when we've got those two things happening, we're in good shape. So you were saying about coaching that it's an honor and a privilege to do it, and it just kind of found you as much as you found it.
It did. I think back to a time when my grandmother used to tell me about her plants, and she'd always end letters with me by saying, "I love to watch them grow." And that phrase has stuck with me through my life. And I think it's true about me too, except for me, it's with humans. And I really do enjoy just walking with them through that struggle of growth and patting them on the back and praising them and pulling them along too. It really is fun work.
That's a great idea. That's a great phrase. I love to watch them grow. I wrote this article called Zero Learning Zone. And it's funny how we inhibit our capacity to grow sometimes. And that's why coaches are so important, because when we're about ready to drop the ball, it's great to have a coach there to help us keep rolling along. Tell me about the journey of writing this book. How did you come to write the book? What was the whole process like?
Well, it was a long process. It was a long process of talking myself into it, quite frankly. I love to be in the middle of the work. And as you know, writing takes a lot of time. And I was not wanting to stop the work to do this work, which you also know is a constant struggle of us in the middle of the work. But I just got to the point where I knew I was limiting the growth of this work by not pausing the on the road piece to do this writing piece. The book can go to many more people than I can get to face, Jim, and I've loved watching it travel the world. That's been a true blessing, and I get so excited to see that. But that's not something that I could have done if I didn't write it. So it was just pushing through that piece of limiting. I didn't want the work to be limited because of my lack of being able to travel to different places. And there is a great need for this support for teachers. And for coaches and for administration. Our schools need strong coaching systems in place, I think, more than ever, and even going back to schools more than ever. So it was just seeing that need and not being able to ignore that piece any longer and just saying, okay, I'm going to do it.
Are you working on a book now?
Have started a book now, and it's just at the beginning stages of work, that just because honestly staying home since mid-March because of COVID has allowed me a little extra time to be home and to reflect on next pieces. So it's at beginning stages, but yes, there is another one in the works right now.
Because the reason I ask is because your comment was spot on based on my experience right now. I think I kind of smiled when you said it, that it takes a lot longer than people think. I mean, you think, yeah, I'm just going to write 350 words every hour and then I can have the thing done in no time. But it just seems to be that, and then you'll write a whole chapter and then chuck it. It is a long, slow process. This book you called Coaching Redefined. Why did you pick that title? What has to be redefined in your opinion?
Well, I picked that title. Well, actually, that title kind of found me in the writing process, in that the title was one of the last things I put on the book. And it was a conversation with another individual that I was talking about what I was writing about in the book. And they said to me, well, Sherry, you're really redefining coaching. And that comment by them brought tears to my eyes. And I knew that was my title. So that's how it came about. I actually did not come up with it. Somebody else did. But the redefining comes from me watching coaches and understanding that they sometimes don't think about this as a holistic process, in that the relationship piece that has to be built into coaching, the leadership piece, and the content piece. So in Coaching Redefined, I talk about all three of those and how they meld together. And also the school admin, how they play a part in that, and how all those structures have to be aligned for good coaching to take place. And I know you've read the book. And know that I've brought in some business scenarios, and my point of doing that is not because I want schools to turn into businesses. I don't want that, but businesses have this vast amount of research on how to create mission statements and vision and market ideas. There's a whole wealth of research out there that if we're wise in education, we're pulling from to make our structures even stronger. If businesses don't get it right, they go out of business. If education doesn't get it right, we just create a poor system. And we don't want that. So that's kind of a long answer to your question, but those pieces together is what I've written about and how I'm trying to help us think about it more holistically.
No, the way I see it, I've been thinking about this a lot recently because I'm writing this book, but I think it's bringing together the best ideas with what, our face-to-face research shows us. So we do research. We're involved in various studies. We just wrote a big proposal. But at the same time, we bring in the literature too, and it's kind of like a melding of the ways. So I've been reading a lot this past few weeks about habits and and I'm trying to create a habit for exercise because I need to. And I told I hired a coach, in fact, to help me. That we're doing Zoom every morning. And I told her this won't be bad for you because the baseline is so low. There's going to be at least some improvement if we do this. It couldn't be this bad and not improve. But that literature on habits, which some of it most of it's from psychology, but also a little bit sometimes applied to business. That really is expanding my thinking. But at the same time, we're doing surveys and we're working face to face, and it's bringing it all together to kind of think it through. So I think you need to so this is where my ideas came from. It came from this book by Peter Senge or whatever it might be. One of the things I like in your book is the idea of the listening tour. Could you explain what that is and how Coach does that?
Yeah, so a listening tour is just a systematic way for those who are coaching or leading any type of instruction in a school to hear the voice of multiple stakeholders. So it's a process where that coach will interview admin, they'll interview teachers, they'll interview students, they'll interview community members to ask them about the instruction that's taking place in the school and how they feel about that. Sometimes we can get in a rut of just hearing certain voices, either the ones that are complaining or the ones who are joyous, but the more that we are in this role, the more likely we will have the same people coming to us with their ideas. And it's so important for leaders to think not only about perception, but reality as well, and seeing what is sticking and seeing how the community's feeling about that. So a listening tour is just that. It is a set of questions that you would ask individuals about the teaching and learning that's taken place in the school. And if you go to my website, I've listed questions there. I would not recommend anybody take all of them and use them, but they are there for people to pull from and utilize. And if you're in the middle of coaching, then you can use those sporadically to just say, this month, every child that I'm running into, I'm asking them this one question. Or every teacher that I work with, I'm going to ask them this one question. And it's amazing what surfaces through those conversations, Jim. It will sometimes lead us down a completely different road in our coaching than we planned on going, because it just tells us a different set of data. And we will think something's happening, but then those conversations will show us something different is happening. The other part that's a benefit to doing that is it sets the tone for, I am not coming in to tell you what to do. I am here to hear your voice first and then figure out how I can best serve you. It's a great piece to build relationships with all those stakeholders.
So I've been thinking about mantras for coaching. Um, these little phrases you repeat. And one of them, I think, is the Stephen Covey one, seek first to understand. That's a great thing to keep reminding yourself to do as a coach. And it sounds like that's exactly what you're doing. And you're really trying to understand, but you're not just understanding teachers, although that's really obviously important, but you're trying to understand all the stakeholders, you know. The other thing I think about this is that I think we're really underutilizing the knowledge of students and how they can help us do coaching more effectively. And I think that's really, kids' voices are really, really important. I mean, they're there every day. They're seeing what's happening. Their experience is the most important experience in a school. And yet we rarely ask them how it's going or get their voice on it. So I think I like the idea of listening to it. Another concept, and I'm just going to touch on some of the.
I will tell you.
Go ahead.
That I think one of the greatest compliments this past year was from an administrative team that I was coaching. And one of the administrators said to me, Sherry, you've completely changed the way I walk into classrooms. I used to sit and watch the teacher and what the teacher was doing and what the teacher was saying. And now I sit with the students and I talk to the students and I ask them how they feel about the learning and what they're learning. And if you do that flip, it will absolutely change your goals for that classroom. We have been trained through teacher evaluations or processes to only focus on what the teacher is doing. And that is important, but what's being learned and heard by the student is sometimes much different than what is being said and taught by the teacher.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And not only that, but when kids have a voice, they're way more likely to succeed. At least that's Russ Westcally would say that. Based on his research. Now, another big concept in your book is the idea of learning organizations. Tell me, what does it mean for a school to be a learning organization? As you know, a long time ago, I wrote this paper about schools as learning organizations. So we have this common thing. So what's your take on that?
Yes, so the last section of my book is all about how to create that learning organization. And the reason that I put that in there is because sometimes this is where we have to think more systematic about what's happening in our school. So coaches will go through this phase at the beginning of their coaching that sometimes I call the honeymoon stage, of where people are asking them for advice and it feels great and they're needed and they feel needed and wanted and all that, and that's great, but it can also very quickly become overwhelming if we don't set up the structures for the whole organization to grow. So if I go into an organization and a coach tells me, yes, people are coming to my door constantly, or I just have this workload, then I will ask them to think about what structures are you putting in place to grow the entire organization, not just one single teacher at a time. So the idea of the learning organization is based on Peter Senge work that you referenced earlier. I love that work. And it just talks about, how do we help build a common vision? How do we make mental models? How do we set up team learning and structures for team learning in our school so that you, the coach or the instructional leader of that school, is also focused on building other leaders in the school, which will make the work more sustainable in time. If we set it up to where everybody has to come to us, then we are really limiting the growth of that school. I always talk to coaches to say, when you go into classrooms, the first two things I want you looking for in that classroom is who's doing the thinking in that class and who's doing the work. And as a coach, I also want you thinking about that in your conversations with teachers, is who's doing the thinking and who's doing the work. Because if you are setting up a structure in your school where you are doing all that thinking for teachers, then they're going to come to rely on you solely for that. But you really want to push them to where they are comfortable doing that on their own and leading that. So that's really where the idea of the learning organization comes into play.
Yeah, I would say if you have teachers who are saying to you, just tell me what to do and I'll do it, you're not a learning organization. You know, that's kind of a way of putting it.
Exactly.
What goes along with that, I think, and I'm jumping around with my questions, but is the idea of systems thinking. And so, and you talk about that. So tell me how system thinking factors into this sort of idea of creating a learning organization. How systems thinking factor into that?
Right. So it's part of that, right? So it's part of that. Peter Sanjay's work in the learning organization, but the systems thinking is thinking about that entire system and how it's growing. So are you seeing a teacher leader emerge? And if you're not seeing teacher leaders emerge, why are they not emerging? You know, sometimes you'll walk into schools and when a teacher tries to emerge as a leader, sometimes the culture is not accepting of that, and the teacher will meet resistance on that. Or sometimes they will rise. So the systems thinking is just thinking about the entire system as a whole, and if you are able to see that entire system grow. And also, is it all aligned? You know, is the administration in the school sending the same message as the instructional coaches? And is that focus the same as the teacher focus? That's your systems thinking as well, that everybody's on the same page about expectations for growth. All that plays into that part.
And I'm going to ask you a question I don't have a very good answer to, so it's okay for you to say, well, I'm not 100% sure. But what if a lot of people in the school are reluctant to be a part of this new culture of learning? They're happy with how things have been. They say things like, well, you know, the kids have to make up their mind they want to learn. If they don't want to learn, it's not my problem, it's their problem. And they're comfortable, particularly if it's high SES. Why would I keep, you know, our scores are pretty good. I really don't see any reason to change much. So if people aren't keen on a learning organization, what do you think how do you handle that?
Well, this is where our work gets quite interesting. And that's part of working with humans, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know that I sat down with one teacher at one time who just basically told me what you just said. And I was ready with their data to say, mm-hmm. Your school has a 70% graduation rate. Is that okay with you? And so I think knowing your data helps with that piece. But I also think, Jim, we have to remember we are working with humans. And it's not a blank slate. They are coming to us with so many previous experiences. And so it's important for us to get to the root of why they feel the way they feel. Mm-hmm. And resistance is not always a bad thing. I think we as instructional leaders have to push past that idea of when we work with a resistant educator, that's a negative thing. Resistance has saved me so many times in my coaching, because when I run up against resistance in educators, it tells me there might be another piece I'm not understanding. And so in my book, I pull in Chip and Dan Heath's work in the area of resistance, and their work around made to stick and how do you get ideas to stick in organization. And then I've adapted those to education. But just there are 8 main reasons that people are resistant to change. We have to be able, as coaches, we need to understand why people are resistant to change, and then be patient with them. You know, just as we ask teachers to differentiate in classrooms, we have to understand we have to differentiate as coaches, because everybody's going to grow and understand at a different rate. and that's okay. They might have gone through 12 administrators in the last 13 years, or they might have a spouse that is dying of cancer, or they might have been beat up by their staff. You know, there's so many things that sometimes we just forget they're humans. So I think patience and grace as much as possible, and being willing to walk with them, but understanding why they're resistant is key. Now, if you can't push through that, and if admin can't push through that, then it might be that a different career is the answer. But I do try to work with people as much as possible in those situations.
Well, you know, when someone's resistant, that's better than apathy, because at least they're resistant for a reason. I mean, they have something on their mind. They're committed to something, you know, and so to me, at least there's energy there. Someone who's like, well, whatever, and they're not engaged. Those, to me, those are the ones that's the kind of person who I'm most worried about, is someone who's kind of given up and hasn't got any energy for the work. At least, you know, I tend to be resistant first. You know, I hear an idea, I'm like, that's not going to work. Okay, let me think about it. Well, maybe that's yeah, I like that idea, but I have to go through this process of not liking it first. So I'm with you. I think and also not all ideas are good ideas. And so sometimes if something comes along and it's not
That's
good
right.
for kids, we're right to say that's not a good idea. So I think resistance isn't inherently a bad thing. And you're absolutely, and I think your systems approach and the learning organization approach is really a good question to ask. If we have a whole school filled with resistant people, it's probably not the people that the problem is. The problem is probably the system. So, well, I was thinking too that one of your ways of addressing this is through a strengths approach. So you talk in the book about how, while we often see negatives first, that you don't find that's the place to start. You think a better place to start is a strengths approach. So do you want to mention a bit about that?
Yes. So first, this is based on research. Daniel Pink's work in this area, I think, is really phenomenal. And his book, Drive, What Really Motivates Us, talks about what truly motivates people to change. And autonomy, mastery, and purpose are the top three ways that he mentions that people will change and grow. So autonomy and mastery, or having the ability to see how they themselves can grow and getting some choice in that growth. And then that purpose piece is thinking about a purpose bigger than yourself. So those first two pieces really go with strengths. Is if somebody's getting to choose their own path, they're not going to say, well, I hate learner engagement, so let me work on that. They're probably going to pick an area where they are passionate and that they can see a path where they can grow a little. And then you, the coach, know that all the pieces fit together. Good instruction is good instruction. And you can pull them, growing them in one area is going to benefit another area. So it really helps to start with the strength so that they can see the possibilities and see that you're there to help them and to serve them. And then you can build that relationship with them, and then they'll take bigger chances on other areas. But I think just starting with that strength not only is supported by research, but it's also a great way to build a positive relationship with people.
I love the work of Rick Snyder and Shane Lopez on hope. And Shane, influenced by Rick Snyder, says that hope involves these three things: a preferred future. And so to me, the strengths part is it's saying, what is something I'd like to see more of? What's something good I want to see? What's some positive change I want to see? And then the second part of hope is agency, a belief that I can get there. And the third part is a pathway to the goal. So we know where we want to get to. We believe we can get there, and we have a pathway there, which in instructional coaching is the strategies. So this is my subtle way of moving to my next question, which is your book has a lot of strategies, which to my mind, effective strategies build hope because they show you how to get from here to get to there. And I wonder if you could just talk a bit about the particular strategies you chose and why you chose them and how they came to be a part of your work.
Yes, so um, this set of strategies that I pulled together incorporate some big ideas that research shows are important and can help students retain information and are connected to the current needs of students. So one thing you're going to see in my book is strategies that gear people towards skills they need for careers. And Jim, I wish we could have a whole hour conversation on this piece because I think this is such a critical piece of education right now that needs attention, that's not getting amplified enough. The World Economic Forum did a study and they interviewed Fortune 500 companies and they asked them what are the skills that students need to be successful in careers. That is a great report for anybody to review. But in the book, I've pulled in the ones that they mentioned that US students need. So some of them match with things we're doing in schools, complex problem solving, coordinating with others. We see that in small groups. But some of them I don't see a lot of. And I definitely don't see us trying to see if students are growing in their abilities to do these things. So yes, we might be putting them in groups to coordinate with others, but how do you as a school know that your third grader is doing a better job coordinating with others than your eighth grader? How does that look different in 10th grade? Or is it just we're putting them all in groups and we're always putting them in groups and they get practice with that? Practice is different than growth. So all of my strategies bring in some of those World Economic Forum career skills that are listed. I also relied heavily on Marzano's research and John Hattie's research of the top instructional strategies. Those strategies in the book, they are not anything that cost anything. That was one thing that I made sure of, that I did not put anything in there that a school would have to spend money on. They are not complex. They are simply really intentionally placed because they help students grow in these certain areas and are the top instructional strategies mentioned by Hattie and Marzano. And so in my practice, those strategies came into play or came into development when I was working with a consortium of school administrators, and they said to me, Sherry, we are telling teachers so many different things that we're not really focusing on anything. And so we just came up with a set of common strategies that would work for them. And that's what I've placed in this book, because those were the most meaningful and the ones that teachers really seem to accept and grow from the most.
I want to move to some of the questions we've got on the Facebook. And a few people have said a couple different things that they wanted me to ask you, and I answered some of them while you were gone. So we're going to compare notes and see if what I said is the same as what you said. Okay. I didn't actually say that much. One of the questions was around tools for remote learning. What kind of suggestions do you have for that?
You know, Jim, I will say this. Well, let me back up and say, I think there's a difference in emergency remote learning and probably best practice remote learning. What we have asked teachers to do overnight, turn on a dime and offer remote learning, it's been extraordinary to watch what teachers have done with that. But we're still learning how to best do that, I think would be probably a fair statement by most. So in taking that into consideration, I think if we go to a remote classroom in the fall, I think we need to be better prepared to help teachers in a deeper way than just teaching them how to use technology, or whatever it's been for our emergency plan. So I say that to say, I don't know that there is one best technology tool. I really think it is going back to the process of coaching. So if as you walk into a classroom, again, ask yourself who's doing the thinking and the work, and remotely, you want to do the same thing. You want to be asking yourself in that teacher's classroom, who is doing the majority of the thinking and work, and how can I help them to get the students to do more of that? So it might be a learner engagement tool such as Mentimeter or Padlet, but it's not necessarily a tool. I think it's more the process that we should be concerned about.
You know, I put a thing on Twitter and I asked people, what are you learning about remote learning? And then we put a blog out that summarized what everybody said. And they said, well, you have to really focus on relationships, and you need to be clear on what your outcomes are, and you need to do formative assessment to see if the kids have learned. And somebody said, doesn't sound much different than what we're supposed to do the rest of the time too. It's still learning is still learning, But I do feel, I think your point's a good one. I feel I'm learning a lot now too. So it's, I haven't got where I want to get in terms of how to do it. It's really a different kind of connection that you have virtually. It works one-to-one, but it's even I think up to 6 people works. But once you get beyond that, if you can't see their faces, it's pretty hard. Do you think the right term is remote learning or distance learning, or do you have any kind of opinion? I don't have an opinion, but I'm trying to figure out which one I should be using. So I go back and forth.
I don't have an opinion on that either. And I think that it's more important that we think about what we're doing during that time,
right,
than what to call it. But that's just a personal preference, Jim.
When I interviewed Michael Fullen, he said, I think we should use the term remote learning. And then I just kind of let it go. And now I'm like, I should call him up and say, why? I mean, I missed the important thing. Why is it a better term? Distance is kind of a pejorative term, a negative term. So maybe that's what he's thinking. So another question we had is, what if you're a coach and you have a large staff? How do you deal with that situation?
Yeah, so you and I see everything in schools. We see the school administrator being the one who is the coach, we see school systems who have the school administrating coach and too many teachers, and then we see it being leveled out as well. I will tell you that my experience in school administration, we had 1,300 students, around 70 staff. I was school administrator plus the one in charge of the coaching and instructional support, which is part of the reason why I wrote this book, is because I know that many are in that same spot of having large groups that they're in charge of, and knowing how to, we can't just say it won't work. We have to be able to help people process how can it best work. So to that individual, I would say, you can't do it all yourself. You truly do have to think about that learning organization piece and how you can set that up. You have to be at peace with what you can do and cannot do, and know that this is not a 1-year process. It's not a 3-year process. This is a journey, and you are creating a better system within that school. And then the other piece that I would say to that individual is differentiate your coaching. Not all coaching necessarily has to take place one-on-one. It's best if it does, but sometimes that's not possible. And sometimes people prefer it to be team coaching. So if you have the right structure in place in the school, then you might be able to meet with several teachers at once and talk about the teaching and learning taking place in their school. That you may have them grouped based on their interest of growth areas, and that may be the way that you're able to handle it. But you have to get creative. You can't just get in one system of thinking that it has to be a certain way, because that can really limit the growth of your school if you're the only one that's there for the support.
Yep. I think just to add something, and really it's implicit in what you said, but I think you want to sit down with whoever it is you report to, and if that's not the principal, that person you report to and the principal, and get clear on expectations and what your role is. And what we found in one study is coaches aren't really even sure what their role is, but if they're expected to have the impact of one-to-one coaching with 600 teachers, it's probably not going to happen. So you need to get clarity around expectations.
I agree 100% with that, and we see that often in schools. And I think that comes, Jim, from two sides. Administration sometimes not understanding what it takes to be a coach and the depth that requires. And then a coach being so excited about getting to coach that they sometimes forget that they need that piece, or don't realize they need that piece as well. But definitely those clear expectations. And then those expectations need to be shared with staff by the administration as well. That is something that I really try to stress with school leadership, is that needs to come from them, not from the coach, because of that chain of authority in the school.
Another question was around first year coaches, and with about 600 students in the school, as I recall. And the question was, what should my focus be to have the biggest positive impact on the quality of kids' lives? So if you're a first year coach, where would you put your focus?
Love this question, but I will be honest with you, I don't think I can answer it. And the reason being is, as you know, every school is completely different. And that's the wonderful part of this work, and that is the difficult part of this work. What I would say to that first year person is start with your listening tour and see what surfaces there. And then I have a tool in the book, the Change Readiness tool, that helps them to think about what they heard in that listening tour and how ready people are to change and grow. They can work through that. And then to get into classrooms and see what is needed, see where the strengths are, and then talking to the staff, find out where the need is, and that's where you start. So that's the beauty of coaching, is that you really get to be flexible and walk with the teachers where they need that support. But it's not just one, it's not as easy as to say, you need to start here. You really have to do your homework and get behind the scenes and see what's happening, and get in the classroom and see what's happening to be able to identify where to start. Now, but that's the thought process I would go through. That's the thought process right. I go through when I'm helping a school think about where to start.
I think that's great advice. I think that's really a good suggestion. So one of the questions too, the last question I've got, aside from my new question I've never asked before, so I'm excited about that one too, but is how is coaching different for virtual coaching? And the person who posed the question, she said, okay, speaking of coaching redefined, how do we redefine coaching in the virtual world? So what are your thoughts about that?
Well, actually, I think you kind of answered this earlier by somebody else's response, but I don't think virtual coaching, when we get good at it, is that much different than what we would do inside of the school. One piece of data that I saw recently that kind of shocked me, Jim, was that 92% of coaching happens virtually. And I did not realize that that number was so high. So it's done a lot. It's just that we in education are so used to face-to-face, and we rely on that face-to-face. But for that individual thinking about how it changes virtually, I would say, what is good coaching? Build your relationships. Make sure you're in those planning meetings when you can be in those to offer support. Make sure you're sitting in their virtual classrooms to see how students are engaged in the lessons, to see if teachers are giving wait time for the questions. Look at their assignments that they're given. Those tasks, are they meaningful tasks? Are they rigorous? Do they offer relevance to the students? And then the assessment piece as well, that the follow-up piece. How are they understanding what students are learning, and how are they adapting lessons based on that? All those things are good coaching. You would do that in the classroom, but we need to be doing that virtually as well. You know, I was talking to a school system this week, and they're talking about, of course, you know, everything's so up in the air for the fall, and the school administrators are really good at planning typically, and we're having to plan for 40 different scenarios in the fall, and that's really tough. And they said to me, I feel like just not doing any professional learning next year and just forgetting the coaching piece. And I said, I think that would be so unwise, because you're going to have greater needs than ever before. And that coaching piece is an element that we cannot let go of.
Yeah, I would say now more than ever we need coaches, because the learning needs are so great. It's uncharted territory, you know, and so there's so much to learn in it. And as I was thinking about the answer to that question, I sort of see professional development support in schools as happening. This is just recent thinking, and it's probably not well formulated, but there's sort of three different things you could do. You can be a mentor, you can be a trainer, or you can be a coach. In the way I'm defining mentoring, and I probably don't have a very good definition, but you're responding to a felt need. So when I was first starting to offer courses virtually and do online work with schools and so forth, I had learned a lot. I didn't know how to set up breakout rooms, and I didn't know how to do a poll, and a number of other things. Actually, Courtney Teague has been a huge help as kind of my technology coach. But Courtney hasn't really been a coach. She's been more of a mentor. I'm just like, how do I do this? And she tells me how to do it. So I think sometimes professional developers are going to be mentors, and that's a big part now, because people have just got new things to learn. Tell me how to do this. The second thing is, there are tools people can learn that are going to be useful. And so whether it's Padlet or whatever it might be, some tool that people are going to use, maybe they're going to use it for formative assessment. And so a coach might provide training and say, let's go through how we set up groups in this particular format. How do we make this work? And then the other part is coaching, where you set a goal, and the goal is something you monitor and you make progress. So the teacher might have a goal about how well kids achieve or how engaged they are during virtual learning. And I think probably coaches next year are going to have to move between those different things. Sometimes I'm doing training, sometimes I'm a mentor, sometimes I'm a coach, and it's going to kind of be all those things. But I don't think there's ever been a time when coaching is more important than right now, because the learning going on is massive, and without a coach, we're going to lose great teachers, and we're going to lose students, because the teachers, it's too much for them to process without the help of a coach. And the coaches have risen to it. I mean, as I've seen what coaches are doing, I'm so impressed by their accomplishments. So I have this last question. But before I move to my last sort of different question, something else you want to add about all the things we've talked about today? Anything you think, oh, they should know this?
No, the only thing that I would just add to what you were saying there is I also think that coaching is more critical now than ever. We think, before all of this, I had been looking at the teacher shortages and the reasons that teachers were leaving the profession, and that is quite concerning to me because we need good, strong teachers. But if you look at an article last year the NEA released on that topic, and they mentioned pay, which we as coaches can't do anything about, but some of the common factors were pay, demoralization, lack of professional development, and lack of mentoring. When you think of those pieces, coaches fit so many of those roles and can help with so many of those roles. So thank you, coaches, for the work that you do and for your efforts to grow in these areas. That is such a blessing to the school system, but you are definitely needed now more than ever. One of the areas that I'm looking at this week is just social emotional support for teachers. You know, that has been rising in importance nationally with our students, Jim, you know that, and there's definitely a need there for social emotional learning of students. But I'm seeing that now through the eyes of our educators. They are going to need that support even more as they re-enter. They're just juggling so much, and that can impact how they learn and how they grow and what they can handle just in life. And coaches can be a great support for them in that regard.
Yep, I agree. We're maybe a little biased about the importance of coaching, but I couldn't agree more. So here's my question. I've been waiting for the whole interview to ask this question. So I want to start asking this question at the end of the session. Let me just say that thank you first, and that next week I'm going to be speaking with world-renowned coaching expert Christian Van Nieuwerburgh, who's been studying coaching and education for more than a decade, and who is really packed with good ideas. He's written so many different books about coaching. So I'm thrilled to, basically, I want to sort of follow Christian's evolution as a thinker around coaching. That's the concept for next week. But here's the question for today. So I asked you to come up with a song that you said is on your mind. I said that it's on your mind, or you think it's important right now. And so tell me which one you came up with.
So everything that you've asked me to think about, that one I probably had to think, well, how do I pick just one? Because in this household, there is a different genre of music playing every 5 minutes. We have quite the eclectic group in my house. But I said, since this COVID period and quarantine period, there are 2 songs that I've kind of meshed together at the beginning of every one of my workouts, and that is Pitbull's I Believe That We Can Win, because of the strength that it shows and that we're facing the fears, and it does just captures what teachers have done during this time of just rising up, facing it, pushing through it. And then Together for King and Country's Together, because it's a softer song and it just shows that we are going to walk through this hand in hand. And both of those together, I just think show what coaches are doing right now and what they'll have to do in the future. So that's the one that I picked for you, is Pitbull's I Believe That We Can Win, because we are absolutely going to beat this thing and come out stronger doing so.
Well, when I got this idea, I actually was inspired by Dostoevsky's phrase, "Beauty will save the world." And I thought, I'll ask people about these songs, and there's something about music that cuts through. And I think that's what Dostoevsky's on about, that beauty will save the world, because beauty brings people together. Beauty puts us in touch with more powerful things. And when I was thinking about beauty saving the world, I didn't have Pitbull in mind. So I just have to say that. But I am pleased. And so we're going to try to show a little bit of the video and his video for it and close. But thank you so much, Sherry. I'm looking forward to seeing you at TLC and many other places. And thank you for taking the time.
Thank you, Jan.